Hello and welcome, this is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, we're going to open up day 15 of the Spellbinders Crafty Advent Calendar and create something with the product inside. Now, if you don't want to know what's in here, pause this video, save it for later when you do want to know or do want to watch, because I am going to be opening it up right now and you're going to see what's in here. So today we have, look at that cute pattern there. Nice and whimsical. It ends up being a slim embossing folder. So we're going to use that to create an embossed background on a card. You could also use this for embossing different die cut pieces to get different texture in them too. I think these slimline ones offer a little bit of an extra challenge from regular embossing folders because regular ones will do the entire background. These thin ones do just a thin line of embossing, so it creates a really nice, unique look. So I did a bunch of die cutting off screen. I'm going to do a little bit of cutting with my mats. I'm creating mats for the background of my card, and I'm going to be using the Lavender Fields Interference ink pad. Now, if you haven't seen any of my interference ink pad videos before this, I have an entire playlist. They're fun ink pads to use because they have two different colors to them depending on whether you're using light or dark cardstock. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to use that embossing folder from day 15 and I'm going to emboss a strip on the background of my card. And my background for my card is going to be white, and then I'm using black cardstock for the mat around it. So I did position that embossing folder just a tiny little bit in. So there's a little bit of a stripe with no embossing on the left-hand side, and then a larger area with embossing or with no embossing on the right-hand side. To go with this embossing folder, I'm using the day 1 hot air balloon die set, and I have everything die cut with black and white cardstock. The only thing that I've die cut out of a different cardstock is the wire frame or whatever holding the basket on the balloon, and then the little flag base piece for the background. So the reason I have this die cut out of black and white cardstock is when I do this interference ink on top of this cardstock, this particular pad shows up purple on white cardstock and green on black or dark cardstock. And even that purple, when you tilt it in the light, you get a tiny little bit of that green shimmer on there, and it's absolutely beautiful. Now, I just did this ink right now, so you're not really seeing as much of the green on black as you do once it's completely dry. It'll intensify or show up a little bit more when it's dry. You do still have to tilt it into the light to see it. And the nice thing about these inks is they're water reactive, water soluble, so I can clean off my sticky mat there just with a damp cloth. I don't need any special cleaners for them. So I'm using some Barely Art glue in a fine line bottle to glue all of my pieces together. I love using this glue because it doesn't take very long for it to start sticking and start grabbing. And using it in a fine line bottle means I can use it for really tiny die cuts as well as larger die cuts. Now, the one thing that I did glue ahead of time on the center of that bow that I just assembled there's a really tiny dot that is the knot for the bow. I did glue that to the bow before inking it because the thought of trying to ink blend or ink that dot and not lose it in my brush, I figured I probably was going to lose it. So by gluing that down, letting that completely dry before ink blending on it, I can make sure that it didn't get lost. Once everything is glued together, I like to use a large acrylic block just to hold everything down. I'll just place it on my die cuts. Keeps everything nice and flat, but frees up my hands for working on other things as well. You can see that the glue really starts to grabbing and start holding fairly quickly. So I don't need to wait a long time before I can start moving and playing around or getting these die cuts out of my way. Now, the one thing that I love to do with these ink pads is I like to use a black or a white mat depending on the look that I'm going for, and then use that interference pad to ink around it to coordinate my mat with my die cuts. For this card, I chose to use a black mat, and then once I did that interference ink on top of it, it shows up green once it's completely dry. I can glue it onto my card once it's dry. I do like to let these inks dry before doing a lot of gluing or playing around with them, simply because those ink pads, when you get them, they are very juicy and they last a long time before needing to be re-inked. So if I start to move things around or gluing them down while the ink is still wet, often I'll start getting ink on my hands and then it will go all over the place. With that background and my embossed background glued down, I can start gluing those die cuts onto my card. And I kept my card very, very simple for this one. You could add multiple hot air balloons. I think that would look great as well, and use them in different interference colors. But I love the look of that interference, and the fact that one pad does those two colors. It never ceases to amaze me and be magic to me. Thank you so much for joining me today for day 15. I will see you tomorrow and we will find out what is in day 16 and we'll create something with that.